Vasudevaya
Vasudevaya
Janmadhyasya yato nivayad itaratas Jate suavigya swarat
Janmadhyasya yatam vayalitaratas jate swavidya swara
Tene brahma hidaya adhikavaye muyanti yat sureha
Tenne brahma daya adhikavaye mojanti surya
Tejo varimadam yata vinimayo yatra tisargo misha
Tejo varimridam jata vinimayo jatra trisargam risya
Tamnasvina sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi
Dhammasvena sada nirastakuvakam satyam param dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva,
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva,
O all-pervading personality of Godhead,
O all-pervading personality of Godhead,
or from my respectful obeisance unto you,
I offer my respectful obeisance unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth,
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth,
and the primeval cause of all causes,
and the primeval cause of all causes,
of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
of the creation, sustenance, destruction of the manifested universe.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It is the only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart.
the original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion,
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
as one is bewildered by the illusory
As
representations
one is bewildered by the illusory representation
of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
of water sent by land sent.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universe
temporarily manifested by the reaction to the three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reaction of the modes of nature,
appear factual, although they are unreal.
appear factual, although they
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental
which is
world,
forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of the
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute
I
truth.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute
Dharma projita kaitravotra,
Dharma Prajita Pitavukta,
paramo nirmatsaranam satam,
Brahmo Nivasanam,
vedyam vastavam atra vastu,
Vedam Vastavamasta Vastu,
shivadam tapa trayon mulanam.
Shivadam Tapo Prayom,
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite,
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni,
Kimva Purir Ishwaraha, Sajor Hidi Avarudyate Tra,
Sadhu Rudya Varidya
Krite Behi Sususabhistakshana,
Ritvi Shishu Shuvistaka,
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities which are material.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest
This
truth,
Bhagavad Purana propounds the high truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth is the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold
This
miseries.
beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the message Vasudeva
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
is sufficient itself for God.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the name of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established in his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpataro galitam phalam,
sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam,
Sukhamukha amrita dravisam,
pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam,
Vibhata Bhagavatam Visa,
muhur aho rasakabu vibhavakaha.
Mora Gora Sika Vibha,
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Bhagavatam.
the mature fruit of the desire to Vedic
The
literatures.
mature fruit of the desire to Vedic literature
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
is emanating from the lips of Sri Shukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this fruit has become more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice is already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was all relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shambhatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Hridyantaksto hiya bhadrani vidunoti suhitsatam. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita, is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. Nasta presu bhajesu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamasloke bhaktir bhavati naistaki. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. Tadarajastamo bhava kamaloba dayaschaye cheta etairanavidam stitvam sattve prasidati. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance. And thus material lust and avarice are diminished. Evam prasana manaso bhagavat bhakti yogataha bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by a devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate hridaya grantis, chidyante sarvasamsaya, siyante chasyakarmani, Justa eva atmanishware. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of samsayam samagram, understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna. Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 1, Chapter Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text number 7. Prayena munayo rajan Nivrita vidise hata Nargunyastaha ramante sma Gunanukatane Hare. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O King Parikshit, mainly the topmost transcendentalists, who are above the regulative principles and restrictions, take pleasure in describing the glories of the Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The topmost transcendentalist is a liberated soul and is therefore not within the purview of the regulative principles. A neophyte who is intended to be promoted to the spiritual plane is guided by the spiritual master under regulative principles. He may be compared to a patient who is treated by various restrictions under medical jurisdiction. Generally, liberated souls also take pleasure in describing the transcendental activities. As mentioned above, since Narayana, Hari, the personality of Godhead, is beyond the material creation, his form and attributes are not material. The topmost transcendentalists, or the liberated souls, realize him by advanced experience of transcendental knowledge, and therefore they take pleasure in the discussion of the transcendental qualities of the Lord's pastimes. In the Bhagavad Gita 4.9, the personality of Godhead declares that his appearance and activities are all divyam, or transcendental. The common man, who is under the spell of material energy, takes it for granted that the Lord is like one of us, and therefore he refuses to accept the transcendental nature of the Lord's form, name, etc. The topmost transcendentalist is not interested in anything material, and his taking interest in the matter of the Lord's activities is definite proof that the Lord is not like one of us in the material world. In the Vedic literatures also, it is confirmed that the Supreme Lord is one, but that he is engaged in his transcendental pastime. Okay, can you tell them just to keep quiet? Yeah, tell him. The topmost transcendentalist is not interested in anything material, and his taking interest in the matter of the Lord's activities is definite proof that the Lord is not like one of us in the material world. In the Vedic literatures also, it is confirmed that the Supreme Lord is one, but that he is engaged in his transcendental pastimes in the company of his unalloyed devotees, and that simultaneously he is present as the supersoul and expansion of Baladeva in the heart of all living entities. Therefore, the highest perfection of transcendental realization is to take pleasure in hearing and describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord, and not in merging into his impersonal Brahman existence, for which the impersonalist monist aspires. Real transcendental pleasure is realized in the glorification of the transcendental Lord, and not in the feeling of being situated in his impersonal feature. But there are also others who are not the topmost transcendentalists, but are in a lower status, and who do not take pleasure in describing the transcendental activities of the Lord. Rather, they discuss such activities of the Lord formally with an aim of merging into his existence. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So the understanding by the devotee that everything concerning Krishna is transcendental, not mundane in any way. But what confuses people is that Krishna, in his original form as Shyam Sundar, or in his original form as baby Krishna, seems to act at times like an ordinary human being. However, he also performs supernatural acts that no one can emulate. So here we have these bewildering behavior of the Lord, and the people who have material desires for sense gratification, they are happy to claim that Krishna is an ordinary human being because he acts like one sometimes. And so they sort of are convinced that Krishna dies like an ordinary person, is born like an ordinary person, and he also gets bewildered sometimes like ordinary people when he saw the gigantic form of Aghasura with his huge mouth open, and the cowherd boys walking, and the cowherd and the cow, and the calves and cows walking into the mouth of Aghasura. Krishna was amazed to see a demonstration of his material energy in such a gigantic form. But that doesn't mean he was confused by it. That was just his acting like an ordinary human being. But then again, he walks into the mouth of Aghasura, expands himself, and chokes Aghasura to death. and liberates the cowherd boys. So they meditate on one thing, but not on everything, and thus they pick and choose whatever they want to support their false premise. But you have to understand Krishna's entire pastimes, not just one little part of it, and then think that you have proved that Krishna is just an ordinary human being. So see, these are all pitfalls that devotees do not get stuck on, but the karmis, because they have envy of the Lord, that's why all of us are in this world, and we're envious of Krishna, they vacillate toward the premise that Krishna is just an ordinary human being. So, yesterday we were going to discuss a little bit more this idea of Krishna's deluding energy. And it's verse, Daivihi esa gunamayi mama maya duratya mam evaye prapadyante mayametam tarantite. So it's a very important verse. Prabhupada said this verse is the solution to all problems of life. So that seems to be all-encompassing in such a simple verse. But it's not a simple verse. It's very detailed. So when it says Daivi, Daivi means transcendental. Daivi he esa. He certainly, esa means this. Gunamayi is consisting of the three modes of material nature. So when it says Mayi, it means mine. My guna, my three modes of material nature. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Now what are these guna? What is the Gunamayi exactly? Well, we have to go to another book called Renunciation Through Wisdom, where Prabhupada explains this. He says, there's an alternate translation of this verse where he says, this deluding energy of mine. So he's referring to Maya, which is a deluding energy, but it's more. But it's a little more explanation of what that Maya is. So this is in page. What page is it? Okay, I'll find it in a second. Okay, so oh, I know why. Yeah, in the Srimad Bhagvatam, 1st canto, 11th chapter, 34th verse, Prabhupada writes in the purport to that verse, in the Bhagavad Gita, this fact is very vividly described, Bhagavad Gita 7:14. What is this fact? The fact is that the history of the world reflects the factual will of the Lord. What is that factual will of the Lord? He says, the unwanted administrators, puffed up, meaning politicians and rulers in the material world, puffed up by false power and military strength, thus become engaged in fighting amongst themselves over ideological conflicts and so exhaust themselves of all powers. The history of the world reflects this factual will of the Lord, and it will continue to be enacted until the living beings are attached to the service of the Lord. In other words, Krishna bewilders the demons, and they develop through science and research and so forth powers such as atomic bombs, tanks, machine guns, cannons, rockets, and these things. And they get puffed up by it. Then they get into arguments, and then they fight each other. And so Krishna organizes these wars so that the demons on both sides kill each other and sort of alleviate somewhat the burden of such sinful people. Okay, so he says, the history of the world reflects this factual will of the Lord. So then he says, in the Bhagavad Gita, this fact is very vividly described. Bhagavad Gita 7:14, it is said, the diluting energy is my potency, and thus it is not possible for the dependent living beings to supersede the strength of the material modes. But those who take shelter in me, the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, can cross over the gigantic ocean of material energy. So this is an alternate translation of verse 7:14. So if we look now carefully at that verse 7:14, it says, Daivi hi esa gunamayi. Gunamayi, Mayi is not Maya. Mayi means my. My gunas, my three modes of material nature. But what are the three modes of material nature? They are they're the stringent laws that keep people deluded. Goodness, passion, and ignorance, deluded in trying to understand what is the purpose of life, and they engage in all kinds of mundane activity by which they become entangled, birth after birth, in the cycle of birth and death. So he says, Daivi esa gunamayi. But then in the purport, he also quotes another verse that says, although Maya, illusion, is false or temporary, the background of Maya is the supreme magician, the personality of Godhead, who is Maheshwara, the supreme controller. So this deluding energy of the Lord is conducted by the Lord himself. It's controlled by the Lord. And for those people who are envious of Krishna, he keeps them constantly engaged in chasing after phantoms of reality. Phantoms of reality. Things that look important but are not really important at all, and it just wastes their time and energy, and they become defeated. Although they claim that they're going to control material nature. But here, in this alternate translation in 1:1134, Krishna clearly says, the deluding energy is my potency, and thus it is not possible for the dependent living beings to supersede the strength of the material modes. So, therefore, the material modes are further defined in the renunciation through wisdom on page number 4, where again Prabhupada says the same thing. He says, in the Gita 7:14, Lord Krishna says, this divine energy of mind consisting of the three modes of material nature is difficult to overcome. Okay, so that's the same translation as we have in our Bhagavad Gita. It's difficult to overcome. But yet, now listen to what he says. The Sanskrit words, Daivi Maya. Now, there's Gunamayi, which means my energy or my gunas, right? But now he's talking about Daivi Maya, transcendental Maya or illusion. Used here can be translated into modern terms as nature's law. This natural law is so stringent that it is impossible to overcome it, in spite of our prolific articles in the newspapers or our big conferences, tabling motions that run into volumes. Our advanced technological and scientific efforts aimed at protecting us from the clutches of nature's law are futile, because they are all controlled by the very same nature's law, or Daivi Maya. Therefore, trying to utilize mundane science to overpower nature's law is like creating a Frankenstein. You all know who Frankenstein is? You know who Frankenstein? You don't know. You know who Frankenstein is? Okay. He was. It's a made-up story that's very famous, and there was a doctor who wanted to create a living being that was powerful and at the same time very, let's say, merciful. So he took a brain from someone and put it into the body of someone else, hoping to come up with this compassionate, giant, demon-looking, powerful person. But, and so in other words, he was dealing with dead bodies, right? But he had a way of bringing them back alive by using some electrical charges and medicines or whatever. So the person that he created was Frankenstein, who looked like a demon, but he had the mind, he had a gentle mind, right? But he's still human. He's not a robot. He's a human who's brought back from death, right, with a gentle mind. So, like any human being, he falls in love with a very pretty woman. But he looks like a demon, and he scares the heck out of people, and he's very tall, right? So eventually, people completely misinterpret who he is, and they think he's ran off with this woman, so they try and kill him. So the whole story is a tragic story, right? And they're chasing him around, and he's running away, and the woman falls in love with him because he's so kind, even though he looks like a demon, right? So anyway, Frankenstein is a anomaly, something that is very strange, and obviously it's a made-up story, but it's all about a mad scientist who puts different body parts from dead people and makes this creation called Frankenstein and brings them back alive, and then it's a complete disaster, right? Okay, so yeah, because he protects himself from the people that are chasing after him. He starts killing people also, and the whole thing, rather than creating an ideal person, he creates a monster, and who's a tragic character. So that's the general idea of who Frankenstein is. You can read it. There's movies about him and so forth. So Prabhupada's saying that efforts to, it says, our advanced technological and scientific efforts aimed at protecting us from the clutches of nature's law, and he's calling nature's law Daivi Maya. It's the transcendental material energy. Why is it transcendental? Because it's, number one, Krishna's energy, and Krishna is transcendental. And number two, it's impossible to overcome, no matter what people do. Okay. So, therefore, trying to utilize mundane science to overpower nature's law is like creating a Frankenstein. Efforts to extirpate, meaning free, humans or end human suffering through advanced technology and bring about lasting happiness have brought us to the atomic age. In other words, the modern scientists have created another Frankenstein, a Frankenstein. What is the Frankenstein this time? It's atomic power, right? Western thinkers have become gravely concerned about the extent of destruction an atomic explosion can cause. Some leaders are trying to calm the alarm with platitudes. Platitudes means stock phrases that sort of make something horrible seem okay and benign, right? So with platitudes about how atomic energy is to be used solely for peaceful purposes. Every day you can read in the newspaper, Iran says, oh, well, all our making of atomic material is for peaceful purposes. We're not trying to make atomic bombs. We're trying to make nuclear energy to run our factories and make life easier for our people. Of course, that's not true. They're actually making atomic bombs to kill people. So, Western thinkers have become gravely concerned about the extent of destruction an atomic explosion can cause. Some leaders are trying to calm the alarm with platitudes about how atomic energy is to be used solely for peaceful purposes. But this is another form of deception caused by Daivi Maya, or nature's law. So what is nature's law exactly? Well, when you talk about nature, it's made up of these three modes. And these three modes are deluding, and it keeps people chasing after goals that are impossible to achieve, such as controlling material nature, eventually solving the problem of death, and stopping birth through contraception. Those are all things that they're trying to do, and they're failing at all of them. Because nature's law means the stringent laws of the modes of material nature. As long as people are attracted by the desire to dominate nature, which is impossible to dominate, they make these futile or useless efforts with great efforts of science, technology. All these things are meant to control nature and make human beings independent of God. Okay. It is impossible, Prabhupada continues, it is impossible for anyone to surmount or control the two-pronged attack of Daivi Maya. So now this is going to explain more detail what are the stringent laws of material nature. That is her covering potency and her throwing potency. So what are the covering potency and the throwing potency? So the throwing potency is called Prasaptatmika, and the covering potency is called Avaranatmika. So nature, or Maya, throws the living entity into the material world and then covers the material entity with material illusion. And therefore they're prisoners in the material world by this throwing and covering, but they're convinced that they are controllers and they're intelligent, but all their intelligence is used for sense gratification, not for understanding Krishna. So they remain perpetually stuck in the cycle of birth and death. The more we try to conquer this divine energy, the more powerfully we are defeated by her, exciting us through the mode of passion and punishing us with the threefold miseries, culminating in all-devouring death. This struggle between the divine energy and the evil forces is eternal. Our inability to understand this struggle has led us to lament. In the dispensation of providence, mankind cannot have any rest. Despite repeatedly tasting defeat at the hands of the divine energy, the evil forces cannot understand why mankind cannot have any rest, or meaning peace. Yet, in the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead clearly explains this. At first, he sternly warns the evil forces with these words, Daivi hi esa gunamayi, mama maya duradyaya. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but actually it means it's impossible. And then, but why does he say difficult? Because in the next sentence he's going to say, but if one surrenders unto me, they can easily overcome it. So it's impossible for the demons to overcome, but it is possible for the devotees. But it's difficult, because one has to give up the false ego and surrender completely to Krishna. And surrender completely to Krishna is not the same surrender that the Christians talk about. The Christians' false idea of surrender is you just come and say, Jesus, save me, and Jesus will save you. And you can continue sinning because Jesus will take all your sinful reactions from that point on and free you from so-called karma, which they don't believe exists also. But that's what they're saying in effect, that once you're saved, it's a one-time thing. Then after that, Jesus takes care of you, and he'll take all your sins, and you'll go back to heaven. Well, that is a false idea of surrender. Surrender is an ongoing thing. It's not a one-time thing. Every day, every second, we have to surrender to the will of Krishna and not pursue sense gratification, but engage in pure devotional service. That's what surrender means. Constant engagement in devotional service. Nasta presu abhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya. It's eternally nityam bhagavata sevaya. Serving the book Bhagavat and serving the person Bhagavat. Right? So despite repeatedly tasting defeat at the hands of the divine energy, the evil forces cannot understand why mankind cannot have any rest. Yet, in the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead clearly explains this. At first, he sternly warns the evil forces with these words, Daivihi esa gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult, but actually impossible for the demons to overcome. And then, in the next line, he tells them how to overcome this divine energy. Mam evaye prapadyante, mayamitam tarantite. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. But this surrender means every second of life from that point on, where you claim, Krishna, you are everything for me, right? From that point on, every second of life, one must surrender. Krishna say, you just surrender once, that's it. Jesus takes care of you after that. No. The surrendering process is in a continuum. It's continuous. It's not just a one-time deal. Okay, so now let's get back to the real issue. Daivi Maya and Daiva Maya, right? Well, this is explained also in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi 4.30. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi 4.40, where it says, the Bhagavad Gita states that devotees of the highest grade are under the care of Daiva Maya, Maya with two long A's, which means transcendental energy of the Lord. Well, it's his inferior or apara prakriti, but it's still transcendental because it's coming from him and he's controlling it, right? And he calls this Daiva Maya or Yoga Maya. And he quotes the verse, Mahatmanas tumam parta, Daivim prakritim asritaha, 9:13. Well, 9:13 is about Mahatmas, great devotees. And what is a Mahatma? It says in the Bhagavad Gita, Bahanam janmanamante gyanavam mam prapadyante Vasudeva saram iti Samahatma Sadurlabha. These are people who have come to the conclusion that Krishna is everything for them, right? That's a Mahatma, right? So now in this verse, 9:13 says that these Mahatmas are under the protection of the Daivim Prakritim, the divine energy of the Lord. Therefore, it's talking about Yogamaya. Whereas the demons, they're under the control of Gunamayi, or the stringent laws of material nature, not the Daivi Prakritim. So Daiva Maya is referring to Yoga Maya, and later on he refers to it, they are under the care of Daivi Prakriti or Yoga Maya. So there's Daivi Prakriti, Daiva Maya, and also sometimes he refers to so Daivi Esa Gunamayi, Daivi Maya. So Daivi Maya, Daiva Maya means the same thing when it's referring to Mahatmas, not when it's referring to demons. Okay? So that's the explanation.
It's the same energy, but it operates, it protects the devotee.
And it entangles the demons. Yeah. It's a little complicated. So when it's referring to Mahatmas, it's Daiva or Daivi Maya, his transcendental, inferior spiritual energy. Right? When it's referring to demons, it's Gunamayi, the stringent laws of material nature that keep people entangled. The ones that don't surrender to Krishna, they're constantly entangled. Or the ones that surrender once but continue to sin, thinking they're saved because they surrendered once. No, it doesn't work like that. They're also under the Gunamayi, the stringent laws of material nature. And that's why bad things happen to so-called good people, because they haven't really stopped sinning, and they just they're in a fool's paradise. Let's put it like that, a fool's paradise. Okay, so that's a little difficult to understand, but you have to see who's being referred to. If you're referring to Mahatmas, they're under the protection of Daivim Prakritim, or the Daivi or Daiva Maya, right? When you're referring to rascals, they're under the control of Gunamayi, Krishna's deluding energy. Okay. Haribol. So we'll stop right there. Are there any questions?
That makes it clear.
Yeah.
Because I think otherwise, we don't find it that confusing sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
The surrender that delineates between how the same energy confuses and affects the people or protects them.
Yeah, it acts. His deluding energy acts in two ways. One, to bring the devotees closer to Krishna, and two, take the demons farther away from Krishna. Okay.
Somewhere Prabhupada gives these analogies that, the cat, the same chick. The cat takes baby carefully, but it's deadly for the mouse. Correct. So some energy operating accordingly. The devotee becomes, but it's some energy. Yeah.
The cat is holding the
With the teeth, it carefully, but the same teeth is the deadly for the mouse, or for the kidney.
Mm-hmm. That's a good analogy. Yeah. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.